Hi guys, I'm Night Angel. Thank you guys so much for 100 subs. I've just got back from a trip to China and I want to take this video as a special one to talk about my trip. So for the last month, from mid-January to mid-February, I've been in Tianjin, China. With all of the fears happening around in the world right now, I want to share with you guys my thoughts, experiences, and what happened with the country and the city I was living in. I do not know what happened in Wuhan or in Hubei, but the fear of being contracted with the virus spread throughout the whole country and even around the world. I'm probably sure that you guys have heard of the news either on the internet or on the TV or even in the radio of this new coronavirus that is spreading around in China, but is really controlled from spreading out in the world. So for this video, I want to talk to you guys about how many places in China were executing prison-like precautions, especially Wuhan, which is more severe than all of the other cities. So on January 16th, I arrived in Tianjin with my parents. I arrived during the nighttime. Everything was really normal and nothing abnormal was happening. I wasn't able to see anything abnormal happening anywhere. There were no signs of shops or restaurants closing, and everything was happening just normally, like everyday life. We had planned to go to Shanghai from February 1st to 8th and return to Canada by the February 20th. But as we all know it, by February, the coronavirus spread out a lot throughout China and everything was shut down. Right now, the current ETA to the Chinese New Year's is 8 days. On January 17th, my parents and I went to get a new pair of glasses. We did not wear masks and all stores were operating normally at that time. However, on this day, on January 17th, we have heard of this new virus happening in Wuhan, but it was said to be under control. Of course, in hindsight, it was not under control. January 18th, my dad had heard about the new coronavirus and it was getting more serious, so he bought a bunch of masks. These were just regular cotton masks, but just regular cotton mask is able to stop a lot of viruses and a lot of spits. When you're talking, you subconsciously your saliva gets spit out, and if you sneeze or you cough, just a regular mask would be able to prevent around 90% all of the spits that another person would emit out of their mouth. In hindsight, after January 20th, all of the masks in all of the cities around China were sold out, and it was a really good move on my dad's part for buying all of the masks before all of the masks were sold out. January 20th, when the 85-year-old academician Zhong Nanshan visited Wuhan, he declared that this virus can spread through the air. Thus, the central government in Beijing, notably President Xi, declared it a national threat, and every level of government throughout China began preparing to control this virus as its source, which was and still is Wuhan. January 21st to 22nd, many families were cleaning their homes, buying food, gifts, and other necessities for New Year's. They weren't really fearing the coronavirus at this time, and all it is that the government, the central Chinese government in Beijing, was beginning to gather medical resources and equipments and other professionals, doctors and nurses from all over the country to go to Wuhan to fight this new coronavirus. But for the general public, not a lot of information was released at this point. In my point of view, on January 21st and I think on 22nd, I thought at this point this virus, this new coronavirus, was just something like the flu, not very much a big deal. At this point, I was still thinking of traveling to Shanghai on February 1st. I haven't been traveling to Shanghai for several years now, and I really was looking forward to going to Shanghai and going to Suzhou and Hangzhou. But of course, as we know, we had to cancel this because if we went, we wouldn't be able to get back because we would be stuck there. We would be quarantined and all that serious stuff would be happening to us. January 23rd to 24th. I was preparing for the New Year's with my families, was playing a lot of mahjong at home. I basically stayed at home with my family for the whole 2 days because this was just before the New Year's and there was this new virus going on and everyone was just staying at home at this time because on the news they do recommend that you do stay at home as much as possible until virus subsides, but as we know, it never does subside, even today. So that was what happened to me, but as for Wuhan, as for the coronavirus, Wuhan was shut down and locked up on January 23rd. All transports were cancelled, including all trains, planes, and buses. There were, and I believe there still are police guarding all entrances and exits from and to the city. However, in other cities, particularly in the city where I was in, Tianjin, all restaurants, shops, and stores were still open at this point of time. I still remember going to a restaurant on January 24th to celebrate the Chinese New Year's Eve. The restaurants in Tianjin were still open at this point of time. Other than Wuhan, or maybe the whole Hubei province, all other places in China, all other cities, provinces in China were still preparing for the upcoming New Year's celebration. So January 24th is the New Year's Eve. I was still thinking of going to Shanghai, but my parents believe that this virus is more serious than people may think it is at the time. So they cancelled the trip to Shanghai right away. And in hindsight, they were obviously right. Traveling around too much would have increased the chances of getting this virus. And if I got this virus, that would mean I would be delayed coming back to Canada and I would be quarantined if I were ever coming back to Canada. I would be quarantined in China, and there were a bunch of issues if I ever did get this virus. Yeah, luckily we didn't go to Shanghai. So on January 24th, during the night time at 8 o'clock, the New Year's Eve celebration still happened on television. I think the guests for the New Year's Eve celebration, they were still gathering for the celebration in Beijing. There were obviously the actors, the dancers, the performers. I'll just call them the performers, and they were gathering together to celebrate the New Year's. I think the Chinese government, they want this New Year's to be happening. They want it to happen despite having the risk of the virus spreading around from this New Year celebration. But since it's the New Year celebration, it's really an important day for China. So they didn't limit the people to gather for this New Year celebration. So January 25th. This was the New Year's Day. The news about recommending people to stay at home, not gathering together, were becoming more relevant, more prevalent, and it was all over the news, basically, on the radio too. However, since it was just only a recommendation, I was still gathering with my close family members, and my family was taking this seriously, but not to the point of paranoia. I feel like afterwards, after this point, after New Year's Day, the Chinese central government was taking this to the point of paranoia. But I think they're paranoid for a reason, since this virus can spread so easily, even if it's not deadly. Since it can spread so easily, it's good to be paranoid, I guess, as the government. So January 26th, the New Year's second day. It's a Chinese tradition to visit the grandparents' home of my mother's side. And so we went. At this point, a bunch of markets were closed down, and the ones that were still open had people with temperature guns measuring everyone's temperature upon entering. So if you want to enter a closed space, you would be required to get your temperature taken. I guess at this point of time, I had only news about Tianjin and some news about Hubei and Wuhan. But at this point of time, you only care about where you're living in, because I was just stuck in my home most of the time. But on this day, I was still traveling to my grandparents' place just for the New Year's second day celebration, because on January 26th, it wasn't blown up as much as later on in the time. So I went to my grandparents' place on a taxi. The taxi driver had a mask on, and obviously we had masks on too. At this point of time, not everyone has masks on. Some people were not caring about this new virus. Some people think that since other people are wearing masks, they don't need to wear masks. Anyways, there are people like that, and as long as I was wearing masks, it decreases the chance of me getting the virus. January 27th to 28th. Due to the increasing awareness and fear of this new coronavirus, I just stayed at home with my family. Apart from maybe going out to play around a bit in the park and obviously buying groceries so that I can eat, I didn't really go anywhere else. All of the parks were closed at this time. All of the restaurants, normal shops were closed at this time. All necessities shops were open, and all other places were just closed down. So think this. If you are going into a place with a crowd, it's probably going to be closed down. Around January 27th, Air Canada has cancelled all flights and to China from January 30th to February 29th. Of course, because we came with Air Canada, my parents and I were obviously trapped in China. Note that we were supposed to leave on February 20th. And the cancellation was to February 29th. We thought about the pros and cons of booking a plane ticket earlier and later. When we decided to book plane tickets online really early for February 3rd from Tianjin to Guangzhou, then on the 4th to Vancouver. We needed to stay in Guangzhou for a night, but we thought as long as we can arrive in Canada, it was good. As long as we get out of China, get out of this mess. On January 28th, we received a message that the plane from Guangzhou to Vancouver has been changed to the 5th. So after some contemplation, we accepted. It was changed free of charge, so why not? We just stay for an additional night. On January 29th, we received another message that the plane from Tianjin to Guangzhou has been cancelled. However, instead of thinking that this whole trip was cancelled, we thought that the part from Guangzhou to Vancouver still remained available, so we booked train tickets to travel to Guangzhou. However, we later learned that it's not the case. It was a bad move to try to travel to Guangzhou because the risk of contamination was real, especially if you wanted to stay a night or even 2 nights. On January 31st and February 1st, we were packing and planning to leave for Guangzhou in the midst of this epidemic in the hopes of getting back to Canada. But then on February 2nd, my mother happened to learn that on a layover flight, if one part of the trip is cancelled, the other part is too. Because the first part from Tianjin to Guangzhou was cancelled, then the second part from Guangzhou to Vancouver would technically be cancelled as well. So much for leaving on the 3rd and going back to Canada on the 5th. So we had to unpack and rebook our tickets to leave on another day. February 3rd. Finally, we booked to leave with Hainan Airlines on February 14th, Valentine's Day. It was the cheapest price when we booked it, and it was a straight flight from Beijing to Toronto. No layovers. In hindsight, we should have just booked Hainan Airlines from the beginning. Why didn't we book it from the beginning? I'm not sure. We were thinking about the cheapest price at that time. But instead of spending more money, we just wasted a bunch of time. Anyways, afterwards, from February 3rd to 9th, I stayed at home for the whole time. It was only my father who went out to buy groceries every few days. We were really scared to go out at all. And also, if we ever stayed out for too long, there were police looking for people who did not wear masks and for people who just stayed out, period. They would tell them to go home, They would tell them to wear their masks, and so on and so forth. I basically stayed at home for the whole time. I did not really even go out to breathe fresh air. Around February 6th, Tianjin was reinforcing enclosed communities protocol. Everyone who wants to enter any housing community has to register and get their temperatures taken. People who want to enter have to use their identity cards to register with the community manager to get an entry pass. Also, all deliveries, including food and others, cannot enter. And by others, I mean all others beside food. Anything you order online, so the residents have to go to the front gate and retrieve it themselves. So this is like setting up a gate on the street that you're living on, or blocking off the door to your apartment. It was really strict. But I know that in Wuhan, it's even stricter. You have to register even if you're going out of the apartment. For me, I only had to register when people are coming into the apartment. When you're going out, you don't really get your temperature taken, or you don't really need to register. So since we had booked our ticket on February 14th, we had to think about how to travel from Tianjin to Beijing. It was tricky because there are gates set up from district to district, and also there are gates set up when you're crossing over from one province to another. And when you're traveling from Tianjin to Hebei province, there's a gate. And from Hebei province to Beijing, there's also another gate. And these gates are where they register you, they register your car, your people, and they take your temperature so that they have a record of anyone who enters the city or the province. At this time, after February 6th, people are saying that if you leave Tianjin and come back, or if you leave where you're living in and you want to come back to where you're living in, you have to stay at home for 14 days due to potentially getting the virus. Because you're exposed to all kinds of people, there's a higher potential of getting this new coronavirus. So that means we could not ask our family relatives to send us to the Beijing airport because they had to get back to Tianjin. However, we were able to find a company that does this business of sending people to the airport. And when they come back, it is said that they don't need to stay at home for 14 days. Because it's a necessity for the city to operate. So at this point, from Tianjin to Beijing was secured. On February 9th, you receive a notice that the plane route was cancelled. Again, there was apparently a massive cancellation of plane routes from China to other countries. So we had to rebook again. After much contemplation with my family, again, we decided not to book online and instead going an actual person to an airplane ticket office. This was much safer instead of using a third-party plane ticket booking site in this quote-unquote dark time. We don't really trust the third-party sites anymore, and this particular third-party site has let us down 2 times in a row. So on February 12th, we decided to buy tickets for February 13th. We were lucky. There were still tickets, but they did cost us a fortune. There were only Air China tickets from Beijing to Vancouver because apparently they couldn't get seats for the layover part from Vancouver to Toronto. So at this point, we were kind of desperate to leave China. So we accepted the ridiculously high price and also only traveling to Vancouver. We decided to buy tickets from Vancouver to Toronto when we actually arrived in Vancouver. So very fortunately, we made it to Vancouver healthily and back to Toronto on the same day too. Apart from loss of money, it was pretty fortunate. So in the end, from this whole situation, I believe that we should have made the decision to come back to Toronto as soon as possible and as quickly as possible when we just heard of the virus breaking out in China. There were many ifs that could have happened either for the better or the worse. I believe that in the case of this emergency, we were pretty lucky to only lose some money and not anything else. Anyways, in the end here, I do hope that this epidemic passes soon and all people of Wuhan and the rest of China get really better really soon. Thank you guys so much for watching. My name is Night Angel. Thank you guys so much for 100 subs, and I hope to see you guys in the next video. The next video will be a normal gaming video. I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye for now.